It's great to say hello to you. My name is Ryan Kane. I'm head of user experience at the Weir Group, and slightly different to the talk that we've just had, and that with Ryan was talking about embracing new technology to inform what we're doing. I'm going to give almost a polar opposite discussion and a bit of thought leadership here around how do we look at the past and how do we look at the physical world to inform the products that we design in the digital sphere. And I've been looking after for UX design and service design for over 15 years across multiple industries, from banking to digital education, grocery shopping, digital pharmacies. But it all started, and look at that nice fresh face of me after I graduated, and I started with a Royal Bank of Scotland here in the UK. And my first job was on the digital transformation project. And when I say digital transformation, my job was to take the paper forms that we used to fill out in the physical branches to open an account or to ask for some borrowing, and to simply make them digital. There was no scope to improve the experience. There was no scope to remove duplication. Simply lift it from paper and put it into the digital world. Now, as frustrating as this was, I did start to wonder, can there sometimes be a good reason to copy something from the physical world when we are designing new digital services or products? But especially, why would we copy that from an industry that we can all appreciate is part of a dying channel in banking? So why would we replicate something from the physical world? Well, we can use something almost without thinking if we have done the physical equivalent before. And if it doesn't feel alien to us, then we will naturally, as human beings, we'll believe it to be safe. Why would we reinvent the wheel? A speed dial in a car, for example, whether it's made of plastic and it has a circle and it has a needle which physically moves, or whether it's a screen that is in front of you whilst you're driving and it still resembles the physical plastic speed dial that has been in cars for centuries. And the speed of use. When we use something without thought, we perceive to be using it in a more efficient way. And we, as users, can get our job done faster and we perceive less friction. So let's break it down a little more. It sounds cool, but what is it by definition? It's taking words, phrases, or names in their usual and most basic sense without any metaphor or exaggeration. It's a design concept. It's a concept that can be embraced and benefited from across all strands of design. And I'm going to talk about that in the next few minutes. But for user experience, it can improve the success of our products. It de-risks deviation from the user experiences that we all work so hard to produce. And at the end of the day, it reminds us that we are all indeed human. And if something isn't broken, don't try and fix it. But for some background on myself, like 3% of the world, I am actually on the autistic spectrum. I was diagnosed as an adult and classed as high functioning. So it might not be immediately obvious. Certainly for people that know me or have worked with me, they might be having a bit of an aha moment right now. But like most people with autism, I am what's known as a concrete thinker. I live in the here and now. I could be impulsive, reactive, if you like. And I've had to train myself to spot where metaphors and similes are being used, and not everything in the world is meant literally. And that's known as concrete thought. My brain treats words and phrases as a solid, indestructible construct, something that cannot be skewed, changed, or even interpreted any differently. Just like this young baseball star that you'll see on screen now. You gotta keep your eyes on the ball. Now, that child, just like me, was taking that instruction literally, following it by fact, and not applying any metaphorical analysis there. But this has been happening in design for a long time. If we break down some of our common user interface components that I'm sure we all use or have interacted with on a daily basis. Most of us will know the story of Hansel and Gretel. They left a trail of breadcrumbs as they ventured into the forest so that they always had a path that they could go home should they get lost. And we develop breadcrumbs to give our users a route home should the destination page they end up on not quite be their planned journey. Now, who remembers these antique machines? I'm old enough that I can remember listening to radio stations with this, inserting a blank tape, hoping to record my favourite song when it was broadcast on the radio station. And it was very difficult to do so, because in order to record, you had to press and hold down 2 of the buttons at the same time. But the interface on this radio was actually only designed so that you could only press 1 at a time. And I think that should sound familiar to all of us here. Now, some of us might be able to hear this image in our head just now, the leather cracking as the musician moves the instrument, expanding its range, allowing him to play with more dynamics and use more notes in the song. In the same way that we can use interaction to expand on content, allow our users to navigate and expand the ability of the content that they wish to absorb. Now, this one always creeped me out as a child, probably too many horror movies. But what I did like about these fairground carousels is that we would see these animals passing through rhythmically from one to the second to the third. I was able to spot the little differences between the decoration on the horses. And again, that should sound familiar and something that we all use on a day-to-day basis. Another obvious example that I'm sure we've all used. But I could go on and on about UI components. Another example is that literalism is actually hidden in plain view. The way that we use icons to communicate to our users and to each other without even second guessing what they are or what they mean. But how many computers actually have a spinning cog inside them? How many of us actually have a steel trash can in our office to dispose of rubbish? And how many of us actually have a binder which flips as we go through the year on our diaries? And this is the most interesting one. I have a niece who spends a lot of time with me at home. And I was introducing her to what a floppy disk was. And I was disgusted when she asked me, how did you 3D print the save button? And she'd never known of the legacy of what a floppy disk was. So the literalism of the design of that icon has transcended generations, but they don't even know where it originates from, but they use that interaction without doubt. Now let's take it up a level. We're at components, let's start looking at product level literalism. How can we apply that to our brand strategies? The first place to look at is actually how do we name a product? How we name a product, if it's familiar, it's easy to understand, and it just makes sense, then our users will remember it far more than something that they have to learn or decipher in the midst of using that. And companies have used that with great success. Now, one caveat I would say is that I'm never going to say to anyone that the logo of a company should be exactly what the product is. But there's very subtle ways that we can achieve success Now, before the overtake of Uber, we may have used the word Lyft. And this terminology comes from a piece of slang language here in the UK. To give someone a lift is to share transportation with them. PayPal have recently settled and launched their own point of sale card reader payment device. And again, comes from the terminology of to settle a bill, to meet you at the door after I've settled up. And one of the more obvious ones, I can remember before iPhones, we would ask each other, can I get some FaceTime with you? And how many of us have said in our careers, I'll save that to the drive? Now, this is just subtle little things that can bring success with literalism. But if it's not done correctly, it can actually start causing some problems and confusion. Now, we probably all recognise this logo and know what the app is, but if I was explaining this to my grandparents, no, TikTok is not the sound of a clock. It's not a metronome app. And no, this isn't something that makes objects bigger. And here's a real test for social media history, but this platform was not a climby wooding stem plant. Now, the naming is not the sole thing that would determine success or failure of a product, but it is a subtle lens that can be used to improve those experiences. If we take it higher again and start looking at product strategy, newer offerings are capitalizing on their predecessors' confusion and building their brand strategy on literalism. Now, I'm sure all of us that are on the call here at some point, if not right now, are using products and actually end up using the name of their competitors. I know that even though I'm forced to use Microsoft PowerPoint, I communicate with my colleagues and talk about the slides that I've made. And even when in Excel, I know that I communicate by saying I've made a spreadsheet. And I'll also say or ask my colleagues, can you share the word doc? And you can see that Google have capitalized that in the naming and as a strategy for their products. And they're not the only ones. Now, literalism can also be used in a two-way direction. We can reflect within a brand or product the way that our users literally interpret our product. I'm sure we all recognize it, and I'm not going to tell you that I think their logo should be a slice of pizza. But what I am going to do is share a fantastic example from an agency here in the UK known as Jones Knowles Ritchie. The agency were tasked with redesigning the packaging for Domino's. And from their user experience, their user research, through ethnographic studies, they found that 96% of Domino's pizzas were actually sold in pairs, 2 pizzas. And they used that purchasing behavior of users to create a literal representation of the brand within the packaging, or as we would know it in the digital world, their interface. 2 boxes, one red, one blue, and when laid together on the customer's table, it makes up the logo and the brand itself. Now, I'm going to share an example from my own experience. And when working with NatWest Bank here in the UK, I was leading the design of the UK's first paperless mortgage experience. Now, I expected the usual user research findings, how people are nervous at certain transactions, how they read the dichotomy of a user interface. But one revelation caught my surprise. Now, here in the UK, and I'm sure across the globe, in this culture, buying your first property and securing your first mortgage is a rite of passage into adulthood. However, it's equally an aspiration as it is a fear. And through the diary study research that I've done, the users' fears and their nerves peak highest and then plummet in the most positive way, the moment that they shake hands with their mortgage advisor. They walk into the branch, they're nervous. Have they prepared the right information? Are they going to get the right outcome that they wish for? And when a friendly member of staff embraces them through a handshake and reassures them to say, everything is going to be okay, I'm going to help you through this, let's go into a private space. That was where we seen the highest nerves turn into the most positive plummet. Now, how could we replicate that in a non-face-to-face experience? How, when we want to deliver the efficiency of a paperless digital mortgage application, how do we handle and cater for the user's needs here? And I solved that problem with literalism. The digital handshake was the most radical UX concept that the bank had come across in their legacy. It involved severe infrastructure change, drastic staff culture change, but by keeping the heart of our users' discovered needs, we were able to deliver a new concept that allowed our customers to receive a personalized video from their remote mortgage advisor. They would receive a business card details, knowing that they can contact them at any point. They would have tailored preparations for them to do remotely, what documents to gather, what information to prepare. They could run an internet speed checker the same way that they would check how they would transport to the branch if it was face-to-face. Where would they park? That same mentality was being used here digitally, checking their internet, checking their camera and their microphone, and most crucially, being able to set out expectations for the next steps through a video. Now, I wanted to probe that deeper, and I studied the mortgage advisor himself on the way that he would hack the process to make it better for his customers, looking at how he was embracing technology to remove some of the manual steps from being done face-to-face and asking his customers to take pictures of crucial documents ahead of their meeting for their mortgage. So again, protecting that hack and that interaction that from the physical world and making sure that it still has a place within the digital world. So I was able to front load the paperwork step, having the customers provide all of their documents and information before they needed to speak with a mortgage advisor. Not only did it mean that they could do some of these nervous processes from the comfort of their own house, but it meant that the interaction being done over video or over the phone was more efficient and was reduced in time. Now, the benefits of that project meant that over 100,000 mortgages were applied for through the digital process in 1 year. And this saved the bank 4.4 million sheets of paper per year. And more crucially for our users, it reduced the timeline from the first inquiry to receiving their mortgage by 25 days on average. Now, I've been lucky enough to receive, alongside the teams that I worked with at the time, awards for the innovation of that experience. I'm very proud to have worked on that project. Now, another fantastic example that I wanted to share with you from outside of my experience is when we start analysing photography, something that we all do. We have a powerful camera built into our phone in our pockets right now. But how does literalism within product design influence the digital versus film photography revolution? Now, not all of us will probably remember cameras that didn't have screens. We would take our picture, we would be able to look through a little preview view of the lens, but ultimately we had to wait until we submitted the spool of pictures to a local supermarket, for example, to have them developed. That might take time, days, weeks, but we would have that excitement and sometimes disappointment when we got the photographs back after that delayed amount of time. But what it did give us was that delayed gratification. We had a new experience, a new interaction where we could reflect on those photographs and almost relive the experience from days, weeks, months, years before, instead of taking the picture with our phones or our modern digital cameras, having that instant gratification, have no follow-up experience. And more importantly for me, we were focusing on the screen and not the subject that we're taking pictures of itself. Now, could we introduce features to our digital cameras and our smartphones where we take a picture, but we delay the reveal, and that way we can focus on enjoying the experience at the time and having some form of delayed gratification? And then I discovered a product called CampSnap. CampSnap is a cheap, robust, and accessible digital camera with no screen. The jobs to be done that it discovered for its users was to give clients the vintage feel of a real camera, taking a real live picture, not making it inaccessible so that newbies to photography could join in, and also being able to deliver a traditional film style image when you look at the end product. There's no screen distraction. There is a flash. It's robust, and it's incredibly affordable. At the moment, it's working out around £50 or $70. So this gives you the flexibility of a digital product, being able to take almost 1,000 pictures, being able to connect them to your device when you get home. So you do get the delayed gratification. You do get the removal of distraction to focus on the here and now, but with the flexibility and the efficiency of being a digital camera. What more? It can give you that beautiful resemblance to a real film picture. So how far could this concept go? Blockbuster, Global Video. I, as a child, would used to visit there on a Friday after school, and I would choose the movies that I would be allowed to watch over the weekend. Now, when certain movies were in high demand and were already being rented out, it meant that the supply was changing every week. This meant that I wasn't searching an overwhelming collection of movies. I could efficiently select something. And it also meant that my options would change and it would feel new and fresh every week. And I'm sure we all spend a lot of time on streaming platforms, probably spending more time looking for movies than we do watching the movies. So what if Netflix could limit their selection and rotate it on a weekly basis? That way we have limited options, but a more efficient route to selecting a movie to watch. Now, I've shared with you some examples from my own experience and from outside of my industry. I've talked about it as a concept, but crucially, let's finish before we have some questions around how we can all take away literalism as a design concept and apply that to the great work that we're all doing. It's an obvious one, but immerse ourselves with our users and our customers. Interestingly, focus on how are they meeting their needs at the moment with a lack of your product? How are they getting their job to be done finished now? Are they hacking the process? Are they employing additional products? Find out how they are meeting that need in the physical world, and we can replicate that digitally. Find the points of that journey that delight them, or find the points that their anxiety is reduced the most. And make the case to ensure that those interactions will exist in your future experience. Your adoption rates will be improved if the user is already being serviced by something they're familiar with. And translate it into a digital format. This has been a snapshot and a whirlwind tour. I could speak about this for hours, but hopefully I've left you with enough understanding and some inspiration on you can take away and apply. And I'd love to spend a couple of minutes to take any questions or any thoughts, Rory.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ryan. That was really nice kind of history lesson through some of the things that maybe some of the younger viewers wouldn't recognize. The good old 3D printing a save button.
Yeah.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions, please do write them in. But I'm going to jump in with the first question, because the kind of delayed gratification, I think that would be a very difficult pitch in Netflix to tell them when everything is considered. It's like Amazon, we're the everything store. Netflix is the everything catalog. To try pitch that it might be better to reduce it. Is that just destined to be a niche product like the camera because it wouldn't appeal to everybody, or when do you think that this could work best?
It could be niche, and it could be an optional feature that some of us, I certainly would choose to do that. I have young children and my time is precious. So when I do get a moment to select a movie, I get frustrated currently by spending more time searching than I do watching. So it could be optional. I think one way that the case could be made, and it's actually a very good example of how KPIs and measurement can help the UX argument, is that data must exist in a company like Netflix, where you could easily calculate what is the time being spent searching and then abandoning versus the time watching, and apply the change, drop it to a few A, B, C, D users, and simply time that and measure it if it's different. So I think a case can be made with data, and as you say, if it is niche, maybe it's a way that we can apply a preference for certain users. I, as a persona, have that job to be done when it comes to Netflix that's currently not being served.
Oh, it's a great example. Make it optional and then see whether the adoption is there. That's a great one. And the other one I have is around protecting, where you said it's kind of take the handshake, the example that you gave of the handshake. Whereas what I would see is that as time goes on, that would probably fall away a bit. With it might be something maybe some of the older customers who remember that interaction in the bank, but maybe the newer customers, younger people might be thinking, well, that's not really relevant. So yeah. How do you, I guess, over time figure out, or do you kind of sunset some elements of your product over time?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should naturally be sunsetting elements as user needs change and our personas change. I think to take away from that example is to, when I talked about how to apply it, is study what works in the physical world and protect it. So even if people now just expect a mortgage to be digital and they've never gone through that physical experience, they still have the same nerves and the same fears. And though you're not replicating what it was like for them the last time they were in a branch and they shook someone's hand, you're addressing that need before they even feel the fears. So for the older generation, they'll feel the improvement. The younger generation, you're delivering to them what they would expect and what they demand. And the important bit there is to study with their users where their nerves peak most, and find out what exists in the physical world now to address it. It might not be exactly the same when you create it digitally, but don't lose it just because you're going digital.
Excellent. No, it's a great example. We had a comment from Mason saying, could an available for X days icon on the film or series increase the scarcity effect and reduce the search time? So yeah, I think that's...
For some it could. I know for me that would put the fear in that I would need to quickly binge watch it before I lost it. But yes, yeah. Anything that, I think the job to be done, whatever solution you apply, the job to be done is reduce my options for efficiency, and to make the stock feel fresh. So yeah, there's a number of solutions that we could do. The important thing is find the job to be done and make sure you're addressing it digitally.